A millionaire hides cameras to protect his paralyzed daughter and sees what the cleaner does. She wasn't a doctor, had no degree, and was barely noticed when she was hired. But after just a few days, his daughter, once motionless, began to respond. What he saw on the recordings left him in shock and changed everything he believed about care and love. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. New York City was waking up under a grey April sky, and Ryan Miller felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. 3 years had passed since the day that split his life into a before and an after. 3 years since everything had collapsed in a way so cruel, so sudden, that even now he still woke up hoping it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. The accident happened on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. Julia, his wife, was driving carefully along the FDR drive with their little 8-month-old Valentina in the back seat. Ryan was in an emergency meeting at the office, solving yet another problem for the tech startup he'd founded years earlier. When the phone rang, he never could have imagined that call would change his existence forever. A car lost control, a violent crash, the sound of twisted metal echoing like a silent scream. Julia didn't survive her injuries. Valentina survived, but the life ahead of her would be completely different from what any father dreams. For his daughter, the spinal cord injury left her lower limbs without movement, without sensation. The doctors talked about treatments, physical therapy, hope, but Ryan could only hear a distant echo, as if he were underwater. In the first few months, he tried to keep everything running. He hired the best caregivers, the best doctors, bought imported equipment. He transformed their home on the Upper West Side, once the family's perfect sanctuary, into a kind of private clinic. He adapted everything: ramps, support bars, non-slip floors. But there was something no amount of money could buy or fix: the emotional connection that was lost in that accident along with Julia. Ryan became a shadow of his former self. The successful entrepreneur, always smiling and full of plans, gave way to a rigid, controlling man obsessed with details. He couldn't hug Valentina without feeling a suffocating tightness in his chest. He couldn't look into her eyes without seeing Julia. Every smile the little girl managed in those early days was like a stab to the heart, because it reminded him so much of the mother she had lost. So Ryan did what he thought would protect them both. He built walls, high, thick, impenetrable emotional walls. He made sure Valentina had everything from a material and medical standpoint, but he kept his distance from her heart. The caregivers worked in shifts organized like an assembly line. He checked reports, demanded efficiency, expected results. But he never asked if Valentina was happy. The first caregiver lasted 6 months. Mrs. Celia was an experienced older woman, recommended by a reputable clinic. But she couldn't stand the environment. Ryan's house was too quiet, too cold. Valentina didn't cry, didn't ask to be held, didn't react to games. It was as if the little girl had learned very early on that there was no point in expecting affection. Mrs. Celia tried to talk to Ryan several times, suggesting he spend more time with his daughter, that he seek therapy. He would listen in silence and then change the subject. After Mrs. Celia, others came and went. Andrea, who was young and tried to bring some joy into that house, but gave up when she realized Ryan monitored her every move with suspicion. Then there was Patricia, who stayed only 3 weeks. She claimed she wasn't equipped to handle such an introverted, apathetic child. In truth, what Patricia couldn't bring herself to say was that the house seemed to suck the energy out of anyone who walked in. Valentina turned 3 amidst this mechanical routine. She was a beautiful child, with curly brown hair and big, dark eyes just like her mother's. But there was an emptiness in her gaze that would break the heart of anyone sensitive enough to notice. She didn't play, didn't smile, didn't speak. The doctors said there were no cognitive or speech issues. Valentina had simply chosen silence as her way of existing in a world that had never offered her warmth. Ryan tried to convince himself he was doing the best he could. He worked late, ensuring the company continued to thrive. That money was never an issue. But deep down, he knew he was running. Running from the pain, running from the guilt, running from facing the fact that he might have failed as a father. Because if he had been with them that Sunday, if he hadn't prioritized work one more time, maybe none of it would have happened. It was on a rainy July morning that Marina appeared. The caregiver agency had sent her resume, but Ryan had barely glanced at it. There weren't many formal qualifications, just some incomplete physical therapy coursework and sporadic experience with children. But something in her eyes when they first met made Ryan hesitate before dismissing her, as he would have with any other candidate without a degree. Marina was 27, with straight black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and a stillness in her expression that contrasted with the city's hustle outside. She didn't say much during the interview. Ryan asked about experience, references, availability. She answered in a soft but firm voice, unintimidated by his curt tone. When? He asked why she wanted to work with children with disabilities. Marina was silent for a few seconds, before replying that she had personal experience with the matter, but she didn't elaborate. Ryan, tired of searching and in urgent need of someone, decided to give her a chance. Marina would start the next day full-time. He made the rules clear: punctuality, daily written reports, no visitors, and above all, total professionalism. Marina just nodded, showing neither intimidation nor indifference. On the first day, Ryan watched from a distance as he always did. Marina entered Valentina's room with light steps, almost as if she were floating. The little girl was sitting in her adaptive chair, staring out the window with that same vacant expression. Marina didn't try to force an interaction. She simply sat on the floor next to the chair and began quietly tidying up some toys scattered around the room. Minutes passed. Ryan, watching discreetly from the slightly ajar door, was about to leave when something unexpected happened. Valentina slowly turned her head, fixing her gaze on Marina. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but it was more than the girl had done in months. Marina noticed and smiled but said nothing. She just continued organizing the toys with smooth, deliberate movements. After a few more minutes, Marina picked up a teddy bear and gently placed it in Valentina's lap. The girl looked down at the toy. Her little fingers twitched slightly, as if they wanted to touch it but lacked the strength or the will. Marina then gently took Valentina's hands and guided them to the teddy bear, letting the girl feel its soft texture. That's when something happened that Ryan hadn't seen in years. Valentina's lips curved slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was the beginning of one. In the following days, Marina continued with that quiet, patient approach. She never forced anything, never demanded a reaction. She was simply present, offering sensory stimulation in a natural way. Different textures, soft sounds, gentle movements. Ryan realized there was a method to it, a therapeutic intention disguised as play. Marina would massage Valentina's little arms while humming softly, stimulate her muscles with precise touches, and work on her muscle tone without it feeling like work. A week later, Valentina made a sound. It wasn't a word, just a guttural sound, but it was communication. It was life. Ryan was walking down the hall when he heard it and froze. He approached the bedroom door and saw Marina reacting to the sound with genuine enthusiasm, encouraging Valentina to try again. The little girl looked at her caregiver with something Ryan hadn't seen in so long: interest. There was a spark of curiosity in those eyes that had once been only empty. Ryan should have felt relief, gratitude, but what grew inside him was something much darker: suspicion. How could this woman, practically a stranger, reach his daughter in a way he never could? What was she doing that all the other professional, specialized caregivers hadn't? And more importantly, why was Valentina responding to her? Ryan's insecurity quickly turned into obsession. He started asking more frequent questions, demanding detailed explanations for every activity of the day. Marina answered patiently, but a slight frown indicated she noticed the intensity of his surveillance. Ryan couldn't stop. The more Valentina improved, the more he needed to understand, to control, to monitor. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. The following week, while Marina was with Valentina, Ryan called a security company. He wanted cameras, not the traditional, visible ones anyone would notice. He wanted hidden cameras, discreet, strategically placed throughout the house. The technician asked if it was for protection against break-ins. Ryan said yes, but they both knew that wasn't quite it. The cameras were installed in 2 days, one in Valentina's room disguised as a smoke detector, another in the living room hidden in a light fixture, a third in the kitchen embedded in the wall clock. Ryan had remote access to everything through an app on his phone and his office computer. Now he could see everything all the time. That night, after Marina had left, Ryan locked himself in his study and started watching the day's recordings. He felt uneasy at first, a pang of guilt shooting through his chest. But soon, curiosity overcame any remorse. He wanted to understand what this woman did that worked so well. What he saw over the next few hours wasn't suspicious, it was extraordinary. Marina wasn't just taking care of Valentina, she was turning every moment into a therapeutic opportunity. During breakfast, she held the spoon along with Valentina's hand, stimulating her movements. While changing her clothes, she performed specific massages on the girl's legs, working atrophied muscles. During playtime, she positioned toys at angles that forced Valentina to stretch her arms, strengthen her core, and engage her body. Ryan watched Marina sing nursery rhymes while gently moving Valentina's little legs as if they were dancing together. He saw the caregiver tell stories using different tones of voice, stimulating the girl's auditory attention. He saw breathing exercises disguised as games of blowing feathers. Every gesture had a purpose, every interaction was calculated, yet it all seemed so natural, so full of genuine affection. But what impacted Ryan the most was what he saw in one of the afternoon videos. Marina was sitting on the floor with Valentina in her lap, and the two were just quietly looking out the window. There was no therapy, no exercise. It was just a moment of pure connection. Marina was tenderly stroking Valentina's hair, and the little girl had rested her head on the caregiver's shoulder. It was a simple scene, but devastating for Ryan, because he realized something that shattered him from the inside. Valentina had never done that with him. That night Ryan couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the images in his head, feeling a confusing mix of gratitude, jealousy, guilt, and self-loathing. Marina was saving his daughter, but every bit of Valentina's progress was a painful reminder of his own failure. He hadn't been able to be the father she needed, hadn't been able to push through his own pain to reach her. In the days that followed, Ryan continued to watch the videos religiously. He saw Marina transform that silent house into a place with life. He heard the sounds Valentina began to make more frequently. He saw the girl trying to lift her little arms, reacting to stimuli, showing willpower. It was a miracle happening before his eyes on a screen, but he remained on the outside just as he had always been. Marina noticed the changes in Ryan. He was more physically present, but still emotionally distant. Sometimes she would catch him looking at Valentina with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It was pain, it was longing, it was fear. Marina wanted to say something, to encourage him to get closer to his daughter, but something about his demeanor made her hesitate. There was an invisible wall he had built around himself, and Marina didn't know if she had the right to try to tear it down. 3 weeks had passed since Marina started. Valentina was unrecognizable. The girl now responded when called, smiled when Marina arrived, and made sounds that almost resembled words. She held objects more firmly, could sit up unsupported for longer. Her body was gaining strength, but more importantly, her soul was coming to life. Ryan knew he should be happy, but a part of him was terrified, because the more attached Valentina became to Marina, the more he realized how dispensable he had become in his own daughter's life. And with that fear grew a disturbing question. Who was Marina? Where did this wisdom come from? Why did she care so much? The suspicion he thought he had satisfied with the cameras had actually only grown. He needed to know more. He needed to understand who this woman was, who had walked into his home and changed everything. And so on a rainy night, while watching another video of Marina lulling Valentina to sleep, Ryan made another decision that would have profound consequences. He was going to investigate Marina's past, uncover her secrets, learn her story, and he was about to discover that sometimes the people who come to save us carry wounds as deep as our own. The morning in New York began with a shy sun trying to break through the gray clouds. Ryan had been at his desk since early, But his mind wasn't on the contracts spread across the table. On his computer screen, discreetly open in a second window, the cameras showed Marina preparing Valentina's breakfast. He had watched that scene dozens of times over the past few weeks, but he couldn't stop. There was something hypnotic about the way Marina moved through the house. Every gesture was gentle, deliberate, full of intention. She didn't just feed Valentina. She turned the meal into a complete sensory experience. Ryan watched as she placed different fruits in front of the girl, letting her touch each one before eating. He saw Marina describe the colors, the textures, the flavors, stimulating not just Valentina's palate, but all her senses. And then something happened that made Ryan drop the pen he was holding. Valentina emitted a clear sound, almost a word. It wasn't just a grunt. It was something more articulated. Marina reacted with restrained enthusiasm, encouraging the girl to try again. And Valentina tried. She tried again, and each attempt brought a bigger smile to Marina's face. Ryan felt his chest tighten, pride, joy, jealousy, guilt, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions he didn't know how to process. He shut his laptop with more force than he intended and stood up. He had to do something. He had to understand who this woman was who could reach his daughter in ways he never could. That afternoon, Ryan began his investigation. He had contacts, resources, tools that most people didn't have access to. He started with the basics. He asked an acquaintance who worked in HR to run a deeper background check on Marina. Officially, it was just a standard security check, nothing more. But Ryan knew he was crossing a line. The first reports came back in 2 days. There was nothing alarming. No criminal record, no significant debt, no involvement with drugs or legal troubles. Marina Hayes was, for all intents and purposes, an ordinary citizen. But there were gaps, periods of her life that weren't documented, information that simply didn't exist. Ryan dug deeper. He found out that Marina had been born upstate New York, in a small town near Syracuse. Her parents were farm workers, simple people who struggled to get by. Marina was the first in her family to get into college, on a full scholarship. She had started studying physical therapy at NYU, a dream few in her situation could achieve. But then, something happened. In the middle of her junior year, Marina dropped out. There was no official explanation, just the dry record of her withdrawal. Ryan tried to find out why, but the information was fragmented, incomplete. That's when he found a name that would change everything: Lucas Hayes. Lucas was Marina's younger brother, 3 years her junior. Records indicated he was born with a rare syndrome that affected his motor and cognitive development. Ryan found old hospital records, medical reports, patient files. Lucas had spent his entire life dependent on constant care, and for years Marina had been his primary caregiver. The story began to fall into place in a painful way. Marina had left college not by choice, but by necessity. Her parents had died in a work-related accident when she was 20, and Lucas was 17. Marina became the only family her brother had, the only person in the world who could take care of him. She gave up her own dreams to ensure Lucas had dignity, love, and care. Ryan found more details in public records and through discreet conversations with people who knew the family. Marina had worked multiple jobs at once for years, cleaning houses, working in bakeries, caring for the elderly, all to pay the bills and for the expensive medications Lucas needed. She taught herself about physical therapy, about special care, about how to stimulate her brother. She was self-taught, but as dedicated as few certified professionals would be. And then, a little over a year ago, Lucas passed away. At 24, after a bout of pneumonia that his fragile body couldn't fight, Marina was left alone. No family, no purpose, without the brother who had been the center of her life for so long. Ryan found records of counseling sessions Marina sought afterward, sessions on grief, survivor's guilt, and existential emptiness. By the time Ryan finished reading everything, it was night. He sat in his dark office, illuminated only by the computer screen. The pieces of the puzzle finally fit. Marina wasn't there just for a job. She was there because caring for Valentina was the only way she had found to fill the void Lucas's death had left. Every exercise, every massage, Every sensory stimulus she offered his daughter was also a way of keeping her brother alive through those gestures. Ryan should have felt relieved to discover Marina had no ill intentions, but what he felt was crushing guilt. He had invaded her privacy, dug through her painful past, exposed her deepest wounds, and all because he couldn't trust, because he couldn't believe that someone could simply care for real. In the following days, Ryan couldn't look at Marina the same way. He knew things about her that she hadn't chosen to share. He knew her pain, her losses, her sacrifices, and it created a strange, one-sided intimacy that made him uncomfortable. Marina noticed that something had changed in the way he looked at her, but she couldn't understand what. One afternoon, Marina was in the yard with Valentina. It was a beautiful day, rare for New York at that time of year. She had placed the girl on a blanket on the grass, surrounded by colorful toys and different textures. Valentina was more animated than ever, trying to reach for a red ball that Marina had strategically placed just out of reach to encourage movement. Ryan watched from his office window, not through the cameras this time, but live, unmediated. He saw Valentina stretch her little arm with determination, her face concentrated with effort. Marina encouraged her with soft words, praising every attempt, even the ones that failed. And then Valentina did it. Her little fingers touched the ball, and a huge smile lit up her face. Marina clapped, laughed, and hugged the girl with genuine joy. And it was in that moment, seeing the two of them together under the afternoon sun, that Ryan felt something shift inside him. It was no longer suspicion, no longer jealousy. It was something deeper, more frightening. It was gratitude mixed with an attraction he wasn't prepared to deal with. Marina wasn't just competent, she wasn't just dedicated. She was special. There was a light in her that could illuminate even the darkest corners of that house. And Ryan, who had been living in the shadows for years, began to realize that he wanted some of that light for himself too. But he didn't know how to get closer. Not to Marina, not to Valentina, not to anyone. He had built walls so high that now he couldn't find the way out. So he did what he always did. He watched from a distance, through screens, through windows, through the safe distance he kept between himself and any real feeling. The weeks passed, and the bond between Marina and Valentina grew stronger, almost symbiotic. The girl would now only eat if Marina was nearby. She would only sleep if Marina sang to her. She only truly smiled when she saw her caregiver's face. It was beautiful and worrying at the same time, because what would happen if Marina decided to leave? Ryan began to notice small changes in himself. He started coming home earlier, sometimes even cancelling important meetings to be there for dinner. He didn't actively participate, but he was there, sitting at the table, watching Marina feed Valentina with infinite patience. Sometimes their eyes would meet, and there was something there. A silent current of mutual recognition, of two people who understood each other's pain without words. Marina started to notice that Ryan was different, less aggressive, less vigilant. Sometimes she would catch him looking at Valentina with a restrained tenderness that broke her heart. Marina wanted to encourage him to get closer to his daughter, but she didn't know how without crossing his boundaries. She could see there was a huge wound in that man, a pain he had carried alone for so long that he no longer knew how to ask for help. One evening, something unexpected happened. Ryan came home later than usual and found Marina still there, even though her shift had ended. She was in the living room, tidying up some of Valentina's toys that had been left out. Ryan stopped at the door, watching. Marina looked up and smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Sorry, I was just finishing up. Valentina had a busy day today." Ryan nodded, walking slowly into the room. "Is she okay?" "She's great. She managed to hold her spoon by herself at lunch today, for almost a whole minute." Marina's voice was overflowing with pride, and Ryan felt that familiar tightness in his chest. "That's good," he said, and his voice sounded more emotional than he intended. Marina looked at him carefully. There was something different about him that night, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Ryan," she said softly, "you know you can spend more time with her, right? Valentina needs you too." He was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "I don't know how," he finally admitted. And it was the first time in years he had said something so honest out loud. "I don't know how to get close to her without everything hurting." Marina took a few steps toward him, maintaining a respectful distance. "The pain doesn't go away just because you keep your distance. Sometimes the only way to heal it is to walk through it." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since they met. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own pain, a recognition from someone who had also been through devastating losses. And in that moment, something began to crack inside him. Not completely, not dramatically, but a small fissure appeared in the wall he had built. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How can you give so much of yourself after everything you've been through?" Marina blinked, surprised. How did he know? But then she understood. Of course he had investigated. Of course a man like Ryan wouldn't let a stranger into his home without knowing everything about her. For a moment she felt anger, a sense of violation, but then what prevailed was exhaustion. She was tired of carrying everything alone. "Because the alternative is to give up on living," she said simply, "and I don't want to do that anymore. I spent too long just surviving. Now I want to live, and taking care of Valentina makes me feel alive again." They stood in silence, two survivors of different tragedies, sharing the same space for the first time without their masks. Ryan wanted to say he understood, that he too was tired of just surviving, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just nodded, a small but significant gesture. Marina picked up her bag and got ready to leave. At the door, she turned. "Tomorrow, when I'm giving her a bath, you could come. You don't have to do anything, just be there. I think Valentina would like that." Ryan agreed, surprised by his own response. And that night, for the first time in years, he didn't watch the cameras before going to sleep. He didn't need to spy anymore. Maybe it was time to really see. The next day, Ryan kept his promise. He showed up at bath time, hesitant, not knowing where to put his hands or how to act. Marina guided him gently, showed him how to hold Valentina so she felt secure, how to make the gentle movements in the water that helped relax her muscles. And Valentina, feeling her father's touch for the first time in so long, didn't pull away. She was quiet, but her little eyes turned to him with a shy curiosity. It was a small start, but it was a start. The following days brought a new dynamic to the house. Ryan still kept some distance, but it was smaller now. He participated in little moments, story time before bed, the afternoon snack, playing in the yard. Marina facilitated everything, building bridges between father and daughter without forcing anything. And all the while something silent was also growing between Ryan and Marina. There were no declarations, no inappropriate touches, just glances that lasted a second longer than they should, smiles that meant more than they seemed, presences that lingered longer than necessary. It was a delicate, almost fragile connection, built on mutual respect and shared pain. But in that fragile universe that was beginning to form, a storm was approaching, and it would come in the form of someone Ryan hadn't seen in a long time. Elaine, Julia's older sister, a woman who, driven by genuine concern and old resentments, was about to put everything at risk. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Elaine announced she was coming to visit that weekend. She wanted to see Valentina to make sure her niece was being well cared for. And there was something in the tone of the letter, a cold formality, that made Ryan realize this wouldn't be just a courtesy call. Marina sensed Ryan's tension as soon as he read the letter. She asked if everything was okay, but he just mumbled that it was a family matter. For the first time in weeks, Ryan closed himself off again, and Marina felt the weight of that emotional wall rising between them once more. What neither of them knew yet was that this visit would mark the beginning of a crisis that would test everything they had built, and that the hidden cameras, the ones Ryan still kept active even after everything, were about to become the trigger for a devastating revelation. Saturday dawned, overcast, as if the city itself sensed the tension that would soon fill the house on the Upper West Side. Elaine arrived promptly at 10 a.m., driving an imported car and bringing with her an aura of judgment that filled every room before she even said a word. Ryan greeted her at the door with cold courtesy. Elaine was a few years older than Julia had been. She had the same face shape and the same brown eyes. But where Julia had sweetness, Elaine had hardness. Where Julia had understanding, Elaine had unshakable certainties. "Ryan," she said, kissing the air beside his cheek without actually touching him. "It's been a while." "It has," he agreed, gesturing toward the living room. "Valentina's in her room with the caregiver. She'll be happy to see you." But his tone held a protective edge, a silent warning that Elaine was being watched just as much as she intended to watch them. They sat in the living room, and the conversation started with small talk about traffic, the weather, changes in the neighborhood. But Ryan knew it was just a prelude. Marina appeared in the living room carrying Valentina. The little girl looked beautiful, dressed, in a colorful outfit, her hair held back with a delicate headband. There was life in her face, an expressiveness that hadn't existed months ago. Elaine was visibly surprised, but quickly composed her expression. "Valentina," Elaine approached with her arms outstretched. "Come to Auntie." But Valentina clung to Marina, hiding her face in the caregiver's neck. It wasn't exactly rejection, just insecurity in the face of someone she hadn't seen in so long. Marina tried to soothe her, speaking softly, stroking her back. Elaine frowned. "She doesn't recognize me," Elaine said, and there was an accusation in her words, as if it were Ryan's fault for not keeping in touch, when she herself had distanced herself after the accident. Marina, sensing the growing tension, tried to mediate. "She's a little shy with people she doesn't see often, but she'll warm up. Want to try again?" Elaine looked at Marina as if truly seeing her for the first time. "And you are?" "Marina, I'm Valentina's caregiver." "Caregiver," Elaine repeated, emphasizing the word. "And how long have you been working here?" "Almost 2 months," Elaine turned to Ryan. "Can I speak with you in private?" Ryan hesitated but agreed. They went to his study, leaving Marina alone with Valentina in the living room. The little girl relaxed as soon as the adults left, smiling again and playing with a stuffed animal Marina had brought. In the study, Elaine wasted no time. "Ryan, what is going on here?" "What do you mean?" "Valentina is different. More alive, but completely attached to that woman. Is that healthy?" Ryan felt anger begin to simmer. "Marina has done an extraordinary job with Valentina. For the first time in years, my daughter is making progress." "But who is she? Where did she come from? Did you check her references?" "Of course I did." "And?" Ryan hesitated. How could he explain that Marina didn't have impressive formal credentials, but possessed something far more valuable? How could he justify that he trusted her, even though he had started with suspicion? Elaine interpreted his silence as confirmation of her suspicions. "You didn't do a proper background check, did you? Ryan, this woman could be anyone. And she has clearly created an emotional dependency in Valentina. That's not therapeutic, it's manipulation." "You're being unfair," Ryan said, struggling to keep his voice controlled. "Marina saved Valentina. She brought my daughter back to life." "Or she's replacing you," Elaine retorted. "Valentina barely acknowledged you when I walked in. She only has eyes for this caregiver. You're letting a stranger take your place as her father." Elaine's words hit Ryan like punches, because there was truth in them, a truth he had already acknowledged during sleepless nights. Valentina was more attached to Marina than to him, and as much as it hurt to admit, it was his fault. "I'm going to suggest something," Elaine continued, her voice taking on a tone that brooked no argument. "I'm going to hire an independent evaluator to come here and write a report on the environment Valentina is living in, and depending on what she finds, we might need to consider shared custody." Ryan went cold. "Are you threatening to take my daughter from me?" "I'm offering help. Julia would want to know that Valentina is being raised properly, not by some unqualified stranger." "Get out of my house," Ryan said, his voice dangerously low. Elaine picked up her purse with calculated movements. "I'll leave, but I'll be back, and it won't be a social call." At the study door, she turned. "Julia was my sister. Valentina is my niece, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you destroy what's left of our family." After Elaine left, a heavy silence fell over the house. Ryan remained in his study for hours, his mind spinning in circles of fear and anger. Elaine had power, money, connections. If she really wanted to fight for custody, things would get complicated. And her strongest weapon was the truth. Valentina was emotionally more attached to Marina than to him. In the following days, Ryan began to withdraw again. Not consciously, but as a self-preservation reflex. He went back to working late, avoiding the family moments he had started to join. Marina noticed the change immediately and was confused. What had happened? Why was Ryan reverting to that distant, cold man? Marina tried to talk to him a few times, but Ryan dodged her. He was trapped in a cycle of destructive thoughts. If he got closer to Valentina, was it too late? If he continued to trust Marina, was he being naive? What if Elaine was right about everything? His old paranoia returned with a vengeance. One night, Ryan locked himself in his study and began obsessively watching the camera recordings. He wanted to find something, anything, that would justify his doubts or prove Elaine wrong. He watched hours of footage of Marina with Valentina, looking for signs of manipulation, ulterior motives, anything that wasn't what it seemed. But all he saw was love. Genuine, pure, unconditional love. Marina cared for Valentina as if she were her own daughter, with a dedication that went far beyond any professional obligation, and that only made everything more confusing, more painful. Marina, for her part, began to feel the weight of suspicion in the air. Ryan looked at her strangely, almost as if he were studying her every move. She didn't understand what had changed, but she knew something was very wrong. The fragile connection they had built seemed to be unraveling, and she didn't know how to stop it. It was on a Thursday afternoon that everything fell apart. Marina was in Valentina's room, getting the girl ready for her afternoon nap, when she noticed something odd about the smoke detector. A tiny, almost imperceptible light was blinking. She watched it for a few seconds, trying to figure out what it was, and then she realized. A camera. The blood ran cold in Marina's veins. She looked around the room with new eyes and started noticing other things. The strange angle of a lamp, the specific position of the clock on the living room wall. With her heart pounding, she waited for Valentina to fall asleep and began a systematic search of the house. She found 4 cameras, 4 different surveillance points, all strategically positioned to capture her movements. The living room, the kitchen, Valentina's room, the hallway. Ryan was watching everything. He had been watching from the beginning. Marina felt a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, humiliation, but above all, a deep sadness, because she had started to trust him, had started to believe they were building something real, and it was all just surveillance, suspicion, control. She didn't confront Ryan immediately. First, she needed to process it. She sat in the kitchen, her hands shaking, trying to decide what to do. Part of her wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Another part just wanted to disappear, to vanish from that house and that situation, which suddenly felt so tainted. But then she thought of Valentina, the little girl who had become the reason for her days, the child who made her feel she had a purpose again. How could she abandon her? How could she just walk away and leave Valentina to return to that empty existence? But how could she stay, knowing she was being watched, that her every gesture was analyzed, that nothing she did was met with genuine trust? When Ryan came home that night, Marina was waiting in the living room. She said nothing, just held out her hand. In it was one of the cameras she had removed. Ryan turned pale. "Marina, I can explain." "Can you?" Her voice was controlled, but there was deep hurt in her words. "Can you explain why you've been spying on me this whole time? Why you invaded my privacy, my trust?" "I had to be sure. I needed to know Valentina was safe." "Safe from me?" Marina laughed humorlessly. "I have dedicated every second of the last 2 months to your daughter. I love her as if she were my own, and you've treated me like a suspect the entire time." Ryan tried to get closer, but Marina stepped back. "I know I was wrong. I was scared. After Julia died, I can't trust anything, anyone. Then, you shouldn't have let me in," Marina said, tears starting to stream down her face. "You shouldn't have let me get attached to Valentina. You shouldn't have given me hope that this could be a new beginning for me too." "Marina, please, I trust you now. The cameras don't matter anymore." "But they do matter," she said firmly, "because they show who you really are. A man who would rather control than feel, who would rather watch than trust. And I can't live like this. I've spent too much of my life being invisible, being just a function for others. I won't accept that again." Marina went to the room Ryan had given her for her things. She started putting her few belongings into a backpack. Ryan followed her, desperate. "You can't leave. Valentina needs you." "Valentina needs a father." Marina turned to him, her eyes red but determined. "She needs you to be brave enough to walk through your pain and love her. I can't do that for you." "I don't know how," Ryan admitted, and for the first time since Julia died, tears streamed down his face. "I don't know how to be her father without it hurting so much." Marina's heart ached, but she couldn't stay, not like this. "Then learn," she said softly, "because running from the pain doesn't make it disappear, it only makes it bigger." When Marina walked out the door, Valentina was asleep. Marina slipped into the room silently, knelt by the bed and kissed the girl's forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I'm not strong enough to stay." Valentina's reaction to Marina's absence was devastating. The next morning, when she realized Marina wasn't there, the girl began to cry. It wasn't an ordinary cry, it was a scream of panic, of abandonment, of pain. Ryan tried to calm her, but Valentina pushed him away, flailed her little hands and screamed for Marina. The days that followed were a nightmare. Valentina refused to eat, wouldn't sleep, and cried until she was purple. Ryan tried to hire other caregivers, but the girl rejected them all. He called doctors, therapists, specialists. One suggested anxiety medication. Another mentioned possible hospitalization if her condition worsened. Ryan watched his daughter wither before his eyes and finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. He hadn't just lost Marina. He had destroyed the only good thing that had happened in their lives in years. And he had done it all by himself because of his own fear, his own inability to trust. One night on the 10th day without Marina, Ryan was sitting on the floor next to Valentina's bed. The girl had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion after hours of crying. He looked at her little face, swollen from tears, and something inside him finally broke for good. He had spent years trying to control everything, to avoid feeling pain. But the pain came anyway, bigger and more destructive than anything he could have felt if he had just let it come naturally. He tried to protect Valentina by keeping his distance, but he only managed to hurt her more. He tried to protect himself by spying on Marina, and he lost the only person who had managed to bring light into that house. Ryan stood up, went to his study, and turned on the surveillance system one last time. He watched the videos of Marina with Valentina, no longer looking for suspicion, but simply seeing the love Marina had for his daughter, seeing the dedication, the patience, the genuine kindness, seeing everything he should have been but didn't have the courage to be. Then, in a symbolic act that marked a definitive transformation, Ryan shut down the system. He removed every camera, every cable, every device. He destroyed the hard drives with the recordings. He left his own fears and his need for control in ruins, along with that equipment. When he finished, it was 4 a.m. Ryan knew what he had to do. He had to find Marina. He had to ask for forgiveness. Not just from her, but from Valentina, from Julia, from himself. He had to be brave enough to change before it was too late. Finding Marina wasn't easy. She hadn't left an address, wasn't answering her phone. She had simply vanished. Ryan spent 2 days searching, calling every contact he had, checking the few places he knew she might be. That's when he remembered the investigation he had done into her past and felt shame all over again. But that information could now save them. Ryan remembered that Marina had lived in a simple boarding house in Queens before she started working for him. He went there on a rainy morning, his heart pounding with anxiety. The landlady remembered Marina and said she had returned a few days ago, but had been staying locked in her room most of the time. Ryan climbed the creaky stairs to the 3rd floor. He stopped in front of room number 12 and took a deep breath before knocking. Silence. He knocked again. "Who is it?" Marina's muffled voice came from the other side. "It's me," Ryan. More silence. Then the door opened slowly. Marina's eyes were swollen, her face pale, her hair messily tied up. The room behind her was tiny, with just a narrow bed, an old wardrobe and a few stacked boxes. On the walls were photos of a boy at different ages. Lucas, Ryan realized, the brother she had cared for so long. "How did you find me?" Marina asked, her voice flat. I needed to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, starting to close the door. Ryan put his hand on the door, stopping her. "Marina, please, just hear me out. After that, if you want me to leave, I will." Marina hesitated, but eventually opened the door and let him in. They stood a safe distance between them in a room that seemed to hold all the world's sorrows within its faded walls. "Valentina is getting worse," Ryan began, his voice trembling. "She's not eating right. She's not sleeping. She just cries for you. And I don't know what to do." Marina closed her eyes, pain crossing her face. "You can't come here and dump this on me. It's not fair." I know it's not fair. Just like it wasn't fair for me to spy on you, to invade your privacy, to doubt you when all you ever did was love my daughter." Marina opened her eyes, surprised by the raw honesty in his words. Ryan continued, the words spilling out like a confession he had held back for too long. "When Julia died, something inside me broke. I couldn't handle the pain, so I built walls. Walls between me and the world, between me and Valentina, between me and any chance of feeling anything again. And when you showed up and started working miracles with my daughter, I got scared. Scared it was too late for me. Scared you'd find out what a terrible father I am. Scared of trusting and losing everything all over." Again. Marina stood motionless, just listening. "The cameras were my pathetic attempt to maintain control. If I could see everything, if I could monitor every detail, then maybe I wouldn't be caught by surprise again. Maybe I could protect myself." Ryan ran a hand over his tired face. "But all I managed to do was push away the one person who was saving my family." "Ryan," Marina said softly, and there was understanding in her voice, even through the pain. "I understand fear. I'm scared all the time, too. Scared of getting attached and losing again. Scared I'll never be good enough. Scared that everything I touch falls apart." She glanced at the photos of Lucas on the wall. "When my brother died, I was lost. I had dedicated years of my life to him, given up everything, and when he was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. Taking care of Valentina gave me a purpose again, made me feel like all the pain I went through had some meaning." Marina turned back to Ryan, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I can't just be a function in her life. I can't just be the caregiver who fixes things while you watch from a distance, because I got too attached. I loved that little girl as if she were my own. And when I found the cameras, I realized you might never see me as anything more than an employee under surveillance." "You're right," Ryan said, taking a step forward. "But I want to change. I destroyed all the cameras, Marina, all of them. And I'm not installing anymore. I'm not going to spy. I'm not going to control. I'm not going to hide anymore." Marina looked at him skeptically. "Words are easy, Ryan. Real change is hard." "I know. And I'm not asking you to believe me right now. I'm asking for a chance to prove it. Come back, not as an employee, but as part of our family. Help me learn to be the father Valentina needs. Help me fix what I broke." "And what if I get hurt again?" Marina asked, vulnerable. "I promise I'll try not to hurt you, but if it happens, I promise I'll be there to fix it with you. I won't run away anymore." Marina was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision visible in every line on her face. She thought of Valentina, the little girl who had stolen her heart. She thought of Lucas and how caring for Valentina made her feel that her brother hadn't died in vain. She thought of herself and the possibility of having a family again, even one built on ruins and second chances. "If I come back," she finally said, "it has to be on different terms. I'm not just the caregiver. I have a say in decisions about Valentina. You have to be truly involved, not just physically present. And you have to trust me. No surveillance, no suspicion." "Agreed," Ryan said without hesitation. "To all of it." Marina nodded slowly. "Then let's try." Marina's return was like watching a miracle unfold in slow motion. When Valentina saw Marina walk through the door, her reaction was instant and overwhelming. The girl began to cry, but this time they were tears of relief, of joy. She stretched out her little arms with a strength she hadn't shown in days, and Marina rushed to her, scooping her up and holding her as if she would never let go. They hugged for long minutes, Marina rocking Valentina gently, whispering words of comfort. "I'm here, my love, I'm here, and I'm not leaving again." Ryan watched from the doorway, tears streaming down his face. It was the first time in years he had allowed genuine emotions to break through the walls he had built. And it hurt. It hurt a lot. But it was a clean, necessary pain, the kind that heals as it hurts. In the following days, the house truly began to transform. Marina was back, but the rules were different now. She didn't just care for Valentina. She participated in decisions, suggested changes, had an active voice, and Ryan, for the first time, really listened. More importantly, Ryan began to actively engage in Valentina's routine. Marina taught him the exercises, showed him how to do the massages, explained the logic behind each stimulus. And Ryan learned, even when it was hard, even when his hands weren't as gentle as Marina's, even when Valentina whimpered because he was doing it wrong. One afternoon, 3 weeks after Marina's return, something incredible happened. Ryan was doing exercises with Valentina, gently moving her little legs as Marina had taught him, and suddenly he felt it. A small resistance, a movement that wasn't just coming from him. Valentina was trying to move her leg along with him. Ryan froze. "Marina!" he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "Marina, come here!" Marina ran into the room. "What is it?" "She moved it," Ryan said, his eyes wide. "She moved her leg on her own." Marina knelt beside them and gently placed her hand on Valentina's thigh. "Valentina, sweetie, can you do it again? Can you move your leg for Auntie Marina?" And Valentina did. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but it was there. After years with no movement in her lower limbs, something was changing. The tears that fell in that moment came from 3 people, Ryan, Marina, and even Valentina, who, without fully understanding the significance, could feel the emotion in the air. But not everything was peaceful. Elaine's threat still loomed over them. As promised, she had contacted family services and requested an evaluation of the home environment. A social worker was assigned to make visits and prepare a report. When the social worker first arrived, it was a Friday afternoon. Ryan was nervous, but Marina remained calm. The house had nothing to hide anymore. There were no more hidden cameras, no more emotional walls, no more lies. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Ms. Beatrice, spent hours observing their routine. She saw Marina doing exercises with Valentina, saw Ryan actively participating, helping, learning. She saw a house full of educational toys and adaptive equipment, but above all she saw love. Love in every interaction, every glance, every touch. Ms. Beatrice spoke with Valentina as much as possible, observed the girl's reactions, and checked the physical environment. At the end of the day, before leaving, she had a private conversation with Ryan. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I came here prepared to find neglect, but what I found is a family that is healing. Valentina is visibly better than her old reports indicated. She is happy, cared for, and loved." Ryan felt a wave of immense relief. "So the report will be favorable?" "It will," Ms. Beatrice confirmed, "but I'd like to make a suggestion, if I may. Marina clearly plays an essential role in Valentina's life. Perhaps you should formalize that in some way, not just as a caregiver, but as someone with legal responsibilities as well. It would provide more stability for everyone." It was a suggestion Ryan had already been considering for weeks. That night, after Valentina was asleep, he talked to Marina about it. "I want you to be more than just Valentina's caregiver," he said. "I want you to be an official part of this family." Marina looked at him, surprised. "Ryan, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to formalize your role in Valentina's life. We could arrange for shared guardianship or we could consider something more permanent." Marina understood what he wasn't saying out loud. There was something growing between them, something that went beyond Valentina, something they both felt but were still afraid to name. "Let's take it slow," she said softly. "For now, let's focus on being the family Valentina needs. We'll figure out the rest as we go." The following months were a time of profound transformation. Ryan drastically reduced his work hours, delegated responsibilities at his company, and prioritized being present. Marina, encouraged by Ryan, re-enrolled in college. He secured a full scholarship for her through his contacts and also made sure she had counseling to process her grief over Lucas. Valentina continued to progress in ways doctors considered extraordinary. The movements in her legs became more frequent, stronger. She started to be able to briefly support herself when holding onto adaptive bars. Her speech was developing and simple words began to emerge. Mama for Marina, Daddy for Ryan. The first time Valentina called Ryan Daddy, he cried without hiding it. It was a word he had waited years to hear from his daughter's lips, a word that carried forgiveness, acceptance, and love. 6 months after Marina's return, they held a small celebration. A few close friends, some of the professionals who followed Valentina's case, and surprisingly Ms. Beatrice, who had become a sort of mentor to the family. Even Elaine was invited, in a peace offering from Ryan. Elaine arrived hesitantly, still skeptical of the whole situation. But when she saw Valentina, she was shocked. The girl was unrecognizable compared to the apathetic child she had seen months before. Valentina was smiling, interacting, showing affection. And when Elaine saw how Ryan and Marina worked together, how they formed a natural and loving team, she finally understood. This wasn't neglect, it was redemption. During the celebration, Marina was helping Valentina with a toy when the girl suddenly leaned on the sidebars with unusual strength. Marina noticed the determination on Valentina's face and instinctively called for Ryan. "Ryan, come here," she said calmly, but there was an urgency in her voice. Ryan came over and froze at what he saw. Valentina was supporting herself on the bars, her little arms trembling with effort, her legs tensed. And then slowly, incredibly slowly, she lifted one foot and placed it forward, then the other. They were tiny, unsteady steps, but they were steps. The room fell silent. Everyone watched, holding their breath. Valentina took 2 more steps before her strength gave out and she had to sit down. But it had been enough. The impossible had happened. The tears were inevitable. Ryan hugged Valentina tightly, then hugged Marina, and for the first time, the embrace between them wasn't hesitant or awkward. It was natural. It was right. They were no longer just people brought together by circumstance. They were a real family. Elaine approached, her own eyes misty. "Ryan," she said softly, "I was wrong. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Julia would be so proud of the father you've become." In the following months, life settled into a new normal. Marina finished her semester with excellent grades and began planning to open a pediatric rehabilitation clinic, a dream she had abandoned years ago, but that now seemed possible. Ryan restructured his company to run more autonomously, allowing him to prioritize his home without compromising the business. Valentina continued her extraordinary progress. Her steps became steadier, more frequent. She started speaking in full sentences, expressing her wants and feelings. The house that was once a mausoleum of silence now overflowed with a child's laughter, with music, with life. And then, one quiet evening as they were making dinner together, Marina found out she was pregnant. The news came as an initial shock but quickly turned to joy. It wasn't a new beginning trying to erase the past. It was a continuation, an affirmation that they had built something real and lasting. When they told Valentina she was going to be a big sister, the girl beamed with that huge smile that had become her trademark. "Baby?" she asked in her still childish but clear voice. "Yes, my love," Marina said, kneeling to be at her level. "A little baby is coming, and you're going to be the best big sister in the world." That night the 3 of them sat on the living room couch, Valentina nestled between Ryan and Marina. The TV was off. There were no distractions. Just the 3 of them, soon to be 4. Ryan looked around the house that had once been a symbol of pain and control and was now a true home. "Thank you," he said, looking at Marina. "For what?" she asked. "For not giving up on us. For coming back when you had every right to never look back. For teaching me that love isn't about control, it's about trust." Marina took his hand. "We saved each other," she said simply. And it was true, they weren't perfect. There were still hard days, still fears and insecurities, but now they faced everything together, as a family. Life hadn't been forcefully restored. It had been rebuilt with care, surrender, trust, and above all, love. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ryan, Marina, and Valentina has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of pain, resilience, and family reconstruction, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Was it the discovery of the cameras, Marina's return, Valentina's first steps? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul and reminding us that it's never too late to change, to trust, and to love. We'll see you in the next episode with a new story that will stir your emotions.